Alright, you guys, bear with me because I really don't have a good setup for doing this kind of video, so I'm going to do my best. Sorry, the lighting is not super great, and I am hopeful that I can actually manage to keep everything in frame because I can't actually see what I'm doing. So I am going to do my best to show you how it is that I set up my pages, my printed pages for Bible study, but I can't really make any promises regarding this setup here. So these are the things that I'm going to need. I have my printout. This particular book, this is Jeremiah. This is exceptionally long, so I had it printed rather than printing it out on my home printer. So I have that. I have my templates for doing the dividing lines here. This is 120-pound cardstock, just a regular 8.5 by 11-inch sheet. And this one is cut to 4 1/8 inches wide. This one is cut to 1 3/4 inches wide. Trust me, take a few minutes to cut these out. It's way easier than having to try to measure on every page. So I have that. I have a pencil. I have my Papermate Flare markers. I have scissors. If you prefer, you can just tear off your washi tape. That's totally fine, but I brought my scissors just in case. And I have washi tape. So now if I were doing this in real, just for myself, then I would do one step of this at a time. I would go through the whole book, the whole step, and then I would move on to the next thing. So for instance, I would go through and I would draw all the lines in first, and then I would go through and I would washi all the pages, and then I would go through and I would write over top all of the keywords. But you guys do not want to see me draw lines on every page of Jeremiah. So I'm going to do a few so that you can see what the process looks like, and then I'm going to skip ahead to the next step. Now, the way that I find that this usually works the best, although I may split this one in half because Jeremiah is exceptionally thick. Rather than try to do this one page at a time where you've got this flimsy piece of paper and it's hard to line up, I find that it's easier to actually do the whole stack at a time. Like I said, I think I'm going to split this one into a couple of chunks. So what I would do is take my pages, kind of tap it together so you make sure that everything is even. And then I'm going to put my template on, and I'm going to add that to it. And it's a lot easier to get this edge to line up properly when you're not trying to line it up to an individual sheet of paper. So line that up. And you're going to take your pencil and gently draw a line here. You don't want it to be a super hard line because you might decide later that you want to erase it after you've written some other stuff on there. It's just a guideline. But trace that line gently. And then you're going to switch to the next page. And we're going to draw a line. The next page, draw a line. As you can imagine, this gets pretty tedious, but it's also kind of mindless, so you can listen to a podcast or music or something while you're doing this. Probably watch a television show, as long as you're not watching with somebody who's going to be annoyed that the tapping sound that it makes on the edges. All right, now let's pretend that I've gone through this whole stack. Switch this back around. Beginning. All right, so we're going to pretend that I've already been through the whole stack with this 4 1/8 inch wide piece. Now I'm going to do the same thing with this 1 3/4 inch piece. This one I find, because it's so small, it's kind of hard to get a grip on. It's harder to just tap it together with everything else. So sometimes I find I may need to even up the edge of that and then just slide this up against it. But still, it's easier to do that when you have kind of this thick stack here. So we're going to draw a line. That one around to the back. Draw a line. And it doesn't matter if these ends aren't perfectly aligned at the edge. You don't have to fuss with it too much because, like I said, this is just a guideline. You just need to be able to know what the boundaries of your columns are. So as long as it's the right distance in. It doesn't really matter if the end of the line are perfect. You can always erase that later after you've done some drawing and whatnot. Trace. So again, we're going to pretend that I've already worked my way through this whole stack. But I'm not really going to do that here because you don't really want to watch me go through all of these pages of Jeremiah. I think it's like 128 pages or something like that. You don't want to see me do that. So we're going to move on. We're going to pretend that I have now drawn these lines and these lines on my entire stack of pages. And so now what I want to do is I want to add washi tape to this edge. And there are a couple of reasons for that. It's kind of nice because it's fun. It looks nice. When you put it on there, it kind of automatically has this sense of introducing color and that sort of artsy feel to it or whatever, so that you feel like you're not looking at a blank page, so to speak. So that's kind of a nice thing. But the primary reason we're putting this on here actually is to reinforce this, so that if you punch holes to put it in a 3-ring binder, or if you punch holes to coil bind it or comb bind it or something like that, that your pages don't tear as easily. That really is the primary reason for this. So I find that the standard width washi tape, let me pick one that's a little bit easier to see. The standard size washi tape is just perfect for this. So it mostly fills up the space, but it gives you just enough wiggle room here that you don't feel like you're over top of the text, and you don't feel like you have to try to line it up perfectly evenly with the edge. You can use the thicker ones, but they're actually a little too wide. And so you may, in fact, find yourself needing to trim them down a little bit. If you try to use the extra narrow types of washi tape, see if I can find one. If you try to use one of these narrower ones, it's really probably not going to do the job that you want it to do, but you certainly could pair a couple of them up, or you could use these over top of another washi tape if you wanted to get a different effect or whatever. But generally speaking, you're probably going to want to stick with more of an average size washi tape. I also have found that all of the metallic, not metallic, what do you call it? All the glittered ones I've tried have actually worked fine. They punch through just fine. So if you have a particularly rough or textured or thick washi tape, you might want to try a piece of it on a scrap of paper. Make sure that you can punch through it without any trouble, but standard washi tape certainly is fine. Alright, so you can do this one sheet at a time, or you can do it, it won't hurt anything if it's mostly on top of each other. So what I'm saying is you can do this like this, or you can set aside the rest of the stack. The advantage if you set aside the rest of the stack is that you don't risk that you accidentally picked up 2 sheets together and you're going to tape them together. The advantage if you keep them on top of the stack is that you don't risk losing track of what order you were working in. But so I'm going to pick a washi tape. There's no major rhyme or reason for this. On occasion, you may find that you have a particular color or theme that just seems to really go well with the text. I've done that on occasion. Like when I did Revelation, I had a couple pages that I did gold with on purpose, but mostly I don't really think about this too much. I just kind of pick something that looks interesting to me and go with it. So then what you're going to do is stretch it out until you have just beyond the edge of the page. You can trim these even if with the page if you want. I don't do that for 2 reasons. One, it's too fussy for me to have to try to find the exact edge of the page and trim it all off. For another thing, I'm concerned that if I leave this sticking with a bare edge, a raw edge right along the edge of the paper, I'm concerned that it would get picked at and sort of come loose. So what I do, I cut it, stretch it out like this so that it's just past the length that you need. Cut that piece off. So now I have this piece, and I am just going to stick that down. You'll notice I don't do it right at the very edge of the paper again, because I don't want to have to fuss with making sure that it's perfectly lined up and I don't have sticky stuff sticking off the back. So this is close enough. We've got a little bit of a border here, or a margin here, so the tape is not right on top of your text. It's easy to read, and you don't have it right at the very edge of the page where you're having to worry about whether the edges are lined up, but it still is plenty close to the edge for your hole punches to punch through here and be reinforced. And then I just turn mine over and tape them down at the back. And then, so it looks like this. And then we go to another page. And let's pick another color. Well, that tape didn't work so well. Let's try a different one. Find the edge of my tape. Like me. Now that I'm trying to do this on video, it's being difficult because y'all are watching. Alright, so I'm going to stretch this out. Just as long as we need. Now that I have my piece cut, I'm going to stretch it out where I want it. Press it down. I hope y'all are not looking at the top of my head because I don't really know what the camera is picking up here. Alright, now, like we did before, we're going to pretend that I have already been through all of the pages and taped all the pages, even though obviously we have not. And then we're going to move on to the next step. So once you have your lines drawn on here, you have your washi done, and you can do these don't have to be in this particular consecutive order. You can do the washi tape first and then do the lines. You can do all of your drawing in and then go back and washi tape them. It doesn't matter. But now we're going to go through and we're going to take care of these keywords that we left in gray. Now with this particular book, again in part because it's so long, I have a few here. Calamity, wickedness, this says gods here. These are references to idols. I have a few here where I actually printed them in a dark gray and left them so that I don't have to trace over them. But then we have these others that I did the conventional way where I've got them in a lighter gray here so that I can trace over them. And what I normally do, you can see here that priest is the first keyword I have in here. But I usually work through it. This may just be how my brain works. Whichever word is most prominent in your mind as the one that you want to start with, oh yeah, I want that color, just start with that one. So for me, I think that I'm going to do families, and I am going to do heritage and inheritance. I think I'm going to do those in green, and I've already decided that, so I'm going to go ahead and start there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip through until I get to one of these. You might end up with my head in the shot here because I can't lean over very well. I'm going to do my best here. And I'm just going to grab my pen. I'm going to trace over this. And then I'm going to keep skimming down the page. There's another one on this page. One advantage to using multiple fonts like this is that you can, if you need to, use the same color more than once in different fonts and they're still going to look a little bit different. Now, I prefer to use as many different colors as possible just because it's easier for me to distinguish them at a glance. But especially if you have two that seem to have sort of some similarities, some relationship between them, even though they're not quite the same word, you might want to do that. So that's kind of what I'm doing here with families and with heritage. Heritage or inheritance, that's something that comes through your family. There's sort of a logical connection there, even though inheritance or heritage and families are two different keywords. So I'm going to use the same color here, but I have a different font. So again, I just keep skimming through, skim down the page, done with that page. flip it over. I'm going to skip to the next page. If I were doing this in reality, I would be skimming through. I'm looking for families. There's no families. So I'm going to work my way through the whole book. I'm going to find every instance of this same keyword, and I'm going to color it. It's a lot easier to avoid making a mistake that way than if you're trying to work just page by page and switch back and forth between your markers, because it's easy to pick up and use the wrong marker and goof it up. So I just flip through page by page, go for the same word. I usually miss a couple and have to come back and fix them, but that is what it is. So let's assume, again, I flipped through the whole book. I've taken care of families through the whole book. I'm going to come back to the beginning. And now I'm going to look for heritage and inheritance. There are no instances on this page. No instances on this page. But we have one here. So I'm going to trace this one. Now, I don't know about you. Lettering is not really a strength for me. So I usually try to avoid doing too much by way of serif fonts when I'm doing these, because I don't really like tracing them. I think they look kind of weird and awkward when I do them. But they do have the advantage of being a little bit distinctive from the others. So again, I'm going to make my way through the rest of this book. I'm just going to skim down the page. I'm going to look for other occurrences of this word heritage or inheritance, which heritage and inheritance, for purposes of this particular book, I'm treating as a single keyword. And of course, these would ordinarily all have their lines drawn them already, but we skipped ahead so that you guys don't have to watch me do all of those. Here we have family. We would have hit that one already. Here we go. Inheritance and heritage. So I'm going to mark these. And I'm just going to work my way through the rest of the book just like this. I'm going to mark all instances that I find of a particular keyword. Then I'm going to go back to whatever is the next keyword I want to use. I'm going to choose what color I want. I'm going to work my way through from front to back, find all the instances of that, and mark over them. And what you'll find is that just by having skimmed this text over and over again in the process of setting this up for printing, deciding what are the keywords, highlighting them, changing their font, coming back through here and marking this, you're really going to have picked up on a lot of patterns and a lot of repetition in this book, even before you really sit down to do your hardcore study. So it feels like the initial setup part of this process, particularly the digital portion of it, it feels like it's really just a logistical preparatory, that it really feels like it's just preparatory and it's not a real part of the study. And to a large extent it is preparatory, but you might be surprised at how much of the study is actually involved there as you're getting yourself familiar with the book as a whole. You're picking up on patterns and those sorts of things. They actually are laying the foundation for your study of the text itself.